For more awesome content, head to ystech.org, link in the description. I sound like a broken record, but PC parts are still relatively expensive. Although, over the last few months, I have observed a few parts falling in price to somewhere around their original prices, such as the Ryzen 5 5600X and the RTX 3060. The bad news is that parts are still relatively expensive. The format of this video, it will be timestamped. I also just wanted to add on, this video is likely to be split up into 2 to 4 videos because I just saw the record time for the first one and it's nearly at 25 minutes, so that's a way too long, so I will split them up and make sure you guys go check out the other ones as well, and I'll see you guys later. First of all, I'll give you some pricing recommendation tips on how to get deals and what videos I have made for them. Also, how to measure performance. With that, some options we have for buying secondhand parts and buying brand new parts. Secondly, what to do for alternatives such as secondhand parts and what to look out for, and also where to buy them in New Zealand. Thirdly, a quote-unquote cheaper PC build, which is around 1,900 New Zealand dollars to $2,000. Fourth, an expensive and overkill PC, which is way over 2,200 New Zealand. Also, at the end of both of these builds, I will compare them to some pre-built PCs and see how the prices stack up. Now this is going to be a relatively long video considering how much I have to get through, so look at the timestamps and see where you need to be at. I'll also use justifications for why I've picked certain parts, as I haven't really done that in the last few months and I think it's good to give you guys a full rundown. Again, both of these builds are really expensive and there doesn't seem to be any in-betweens for budget or cheaper PCs in New Zealand now, at least in the brand new market. Although in the secondhand market it is still a bit pricey, but you can get something a little bit more decent compared to brand new. I am still in lockdown at the time of recording, level 4, so prices aren't really that great anymore. Also, I do really apologize for ignoring these builds and advice guides, as it just didn't sit right with me anymore to spam these videos out whilst prices are still unaffordable, and I was also swamped with assignments. If you haven't already, check out the videos that you see on screen right now to understand more about the state of PC prices in New Zealand. Let's get on to the advice. Now, I do have a few videos on how to get deals on PC parts, how to measure performance, and where to buy secondhand parts. These questions are answered in those videos, so I suggest you check out the videos in the description. Some of these videos include I made a gaming PC for $300 in New Zealand, which addresses the second-hand market. PC parts just got cheaper in New Zealand, which addresses Amazon and its play in the New Zealand PC market. How I get deals on PC parts, it's pretty self-explanatory. It's how to get deals really easily on New Zealand, and how to stalk prices in order to make sure you're getting the best price you can at the time you're purchasing. Lastly, how much FPS will this PC get is basically a performance metric on trying to understand how a PC may perform with specific parts that you wish to build with. Now again, as a disclaimer for that video, it may not be exactly what you think it is, and people can manipulate numbers online, so it's best to take it with a little bit of a grain of salt, but it is a good way to try and figure out what you're dealing with. So let's get on to the first cheaper end PC build. So I'm sorry to say this, but this build is about $2,000 New Zealand. It's very expensive for a brand new PC, but honestly, at this price, it's pretty okay. In this current market, it's probably the best options you could pick, but let's go straight into it. So in the order, I'll go from the PC build, I'll go the CPU first, motherboard, memory, storage, graphics card, case, and then power supply. So all of them are on varied degrees of length, so check out the timestamps in the description. I know not all of them will be up on the screen, but they will be in the description for you to click around. For example, the motherboard or the CPU, you can just click to it at the start and you'll be able to see what I'm talking about. So let's get on to the CPU. For the CPU, it's a hard pick. If you're brand loyal to AMD, then I would stick to them considering their upgradability path with their new lines of motherboards, i.e. the B550 ones. You could go with something like a Ryzen 5 3600 or if you want to, a Ryzen 7 3700X for more cores if you need them for productivity. The only problem is that these parts have become very expensive and are not as cheap as they used to be. If you need a CPU specifically for gaming and for a cheaper price, then in New Zealand, Intel is your go-to. The reason is because CPUs such as the i5-10400F are extremely good when it comes to performance in games. The i5 CPU performs in a lot of instances from what I have seen in online benchmarks much better than its competitors such as the Ryzen 5 3600, which is around $330, and the i5-10400F is at around $250 New Zealand. Even the updated i5-11400 is quite good for the money when it comes to down to about sub $290 New Zealand. But unfortunately, currently it's still at $330 New Zealand, which is about the same as the Ryzen 5 3600. There's also a good video on the i5-11400 by Hardware Canucks. I would consider watching that video in the description. It's also good to keep in mind that both the Intel CPUs listed here and as far as I know are locked, so you cannot overclock them. You could potentially do some memory overclocking depending on which board you go with, motherboard, but it does limit your options. The Ryzen 5 3600 is an unlocked processor, so you will be able to overclock on it. On a side note, in my personal experience, 4 cores is not enough for AAA gaming anymore, as I personally felt when I was playing using my Ryzen 5 1500X that on games such as Assassin's Creed Odyssey and specifically Origins that prompted my upgrade, the CPU could not keep up at all. And those games are a little bit older now, they're not even the latest titles. Compared to my upgraded Ryzen 7 3700X, it feels amazing with no problems at all. But if you could snag a good 4-core CPU secondhand, which I mentioned before in the secondhand recommendations, then go for it if you want to enjoy an esport title or you don't really mind turning down your settings. But trust me, 4 cores on AAA games, at least in my experience, just doesn't feel that great anymore. Now if you're going with the Intel build, which you probably are, then I would suggest not using the stock Intel heatsink and cooler. The one from AMD is fine, it's pretty decent with the Ryzen 5 3600, although they are giving a smaller version on it, so if you can upgrade, actually for both brands it'd probably be better in the long run, but in any case, if you're specifically with Intel, I'd definitely try to change that out. So for the CPU cooler, I would go for something like the EK AIO 240 DRGB, for around $180 New Zealand or $150 on special, or a good Noctua cooler such as the Noctua NH-U12S for $129 New Zealand dollars. I can personally vouch for the EKAIO 240 DRGB, as I use it every day in my computer with no problems whatsoever. It was easy to install, and I've uninstalled it once and reinstalled it with no problems at all. The Noctua one is also extremely high quality and will do you well for its price with very good thermal performance. Either one of these would be far superior to the Intel stock cooler or even the one that comes with the AMD Ryzen 5 3600. Next we have the motherboard. Now this motherboard I have no experience with and I'm trying to keep the build below 1900, but it does have a VRM heatsink, but I'm not really sure how great it is. It's probably not that great for overclocking, but you could try with at least the memory. It is good to note that some B560 motherboards have less favorable performance compared to other B560 motherboards. You can see Hardware Unbox's video in the description. The board is the Asus Prime B560M-A, meaning that it is a micro ATX motherboard. It has 2 slots for RAM, 2 M.2 slots, with PCIe 4.0, which is pretty decent. It also has 6 SATA ports and 2 times 16x slots, which is pretty good. One, I believe, is operating at PCIe 4.0 and the other at 3.0 as far as I know. It's a decent board for what it is. It's a bit pricey at I believe $180. I can't believe I didn't write in the script, but no, I can't vouch for it or say that I've even used it. But before it's something I would buy if I were going to use a Intel CPU, just at that price range. Next we have the RAM. At this price range, and considering RAM under $149 is the way to go. For this build, I like G.Skill, and I've picked their G.Skill Ripjaws V2 8GB of RAM, totaling 16GB at DDR4 3200. If this G.Skill is not available, I would consider something like the Corsair or Kingston RAM with 16GB at CL16. Just make sure that it's CL16 and not anything higher like CL18. You want something below CL16 DDR4 3200 for $149. There are some examples on screen which you can check out as well. Unfortunately, with Intel processors and the B motherboards, as shown before, this RAM won't be able to run at the rated DDR4 3200 as far as I know, and instead will most likely run at below DDR4 3000. But in my opinion, this is alright, as you can tighten the timings on CL16 RAM by using an XMP profile if you can, I'm not really sure, and hence you get better efficiency on your RAM. At the same time, you might be wondering why I haven't gone for DDR4 2666, CL16 16GB for a cheaper price. The reason is that the RAM could run at a higher frequency such as DDR4 2933 instead of 2666 by default. Although this is likely something you will need to change yourself in the BIOS's XMP profile. If that made no sense to you, that's alright. There are a few videos that Linus has made which can explain it, which will be in the description as well. All in all, stated above, 16GB at DDR4 3200 with CL16 for under $149 New Zealand will be the way to go. Next we have storage. There really isn't too much to say about this. Personally, I only buy Samsung SSDs now, and this Samsung 870 EVO 500GB is an awesome starting point for a gaming PC at only $115 or below. It's quite fast, and you don't have to sacrifice any M.2 slots for SATA ports, if that matters to you. It does for me. At the same time, a great M.2 NVMe drive for faster speeds is something like the Samsung 970 EVO or EVO Plus 500GB SSD. These come in at around $130 New Zealand and is a great price and will suit you really well, especially if you're playing games. It's a lot faster than the SATA one, so if you just want speed, then probably I would go for the 970 EVO over the 870 because NVMe, is faster than SATA, so should be a significant performance increase per se, but I cannot attest to that. If you need an additional hard drive for only games, you could buy a second-hand hard drive that hasn't been used for too long or mined on. Yes, people can mine on hard drives now using Shiacoin, so just be a bit careful. As long as you can see the specs and info from a software called Crystal Disk Mark Info, and it says it has relatively low power on hours and there's nothing wrong in terms of its smart tests, then they should work fine. Just don't put any of your personal data on there that you're not willing to lose. Only try to put your games on them. You could also purchase them for about as low as $30 a terabyte, which is very, very good. If you don't like that idea and would just like to go for a brand new hard drive, then I'd probably suggest something as the Seagate Barracuda or Western Digital Blue 1TB for about $80 for peace of mind, and also you'll be able to keep your personal files on it without worrying about anything. Now to the one we've been waiting for, brand new graphics card. Oh, what a mess this is. So there are no graphics cards that are brand new that are relatively cheap. The graphics cards that are currently out are relatively expensive. So the ones that are relatively cheap at a cheaper price point are cards such as the GTX 1650 for about under $400, which is a complete ripoff for the price and performance you are receiving. Even cards like the GT 1030 or the re-released 1050 Ti are being sold at stupid prices. Now don't be offended if you bought these cards and paid a slightly higher price. Honestly, everyone is being fleeced at the moment, and it's not only you. So I mean, if you are able to get something better later on, you could return this one. if you're not liking the performance at the moment. One great thing that has happened for brand new parts is the release of the 6600 XT. This graphics card is a bit lackluster for its price, however it's the cheapest brand new card that is released so far, at as low as $650. Even at $650, it's way off the MSRP that was promised, but at the same time, it's the best thing you can get brand new, although it does have its limitations. This graphics card is a bit lackluster for its price, however it's the cheapest brand new card that is released so far. Its closest competitor is the RTX 3060 Ti, which is over $1,150 New Zealand right now, with the 6600 XT ranging from the cheapest of $640 New Zealand or $650 to about $800 New Zealand, which is pretty okay. From this perspective, the 6600 XT is a good card for the price. However, it does come with future limitations such as only being half the bandwidth. It's not 16x, it's 8x as far as I know. The RX 6600 XT performs similarly to the RX 5700 XT, but at higher prices generally speaking, and performs poorly compared to the RTX 3060 Ti, but does moderately well against the RTX 3060 depending on the PC build configuration and game titles. The RTX 3060 Ti is still the better card. However, it's nearly $400 more in New Zealand right now. I reckon if you really need an upgrade, for example, your games are lagging or you're looking to build a brand new computer for some reason, the RX 6600 XT is the way to go, with any of the RX 6600 XTs priced at under 780 New Zealand dollars. The ones over about $780 New Zealand are a bit too overpriced for what they offered. The MSRP was supposed to be around 380 US dollars, which would have been about 550 New Zealand dollars. So for the 6600 XT ranging around 640 New Zealand dollars, such as the Sapphire one or the Power Color one, isn't actually too bad a deal, with it still being the cheapest brand new card that is released in the last 2 years, well at least with the new generations. Again, at these prices and what they are supposed to be, if you don't really need an upgrade, I would wait, considering that this is basically robbery at these higher prices. One other thing to consider is that these prices are not here to stay. I have read articles and watched videos saying that AMD has no intention of keeping the RX 6600 XTs, such as the Power Color or the Sapphire ones, at around 640 New Zealand dollars. And this is more of a launch special. It is likely only the higher end cards like the ones from Gigabyte and other board manufacturers will get the most stock at these higher prices. Therefore, if you really want one, you probably need to get it as soon as possible if you really want a brand new graphics card. If you really need an upgrade, I would go for it. If not, hold off for now. If the 6600 XT is not available, the best next go-to would be the RTX 3060 at below 850 New Zealand dollars or 900. That should be alright. Or the RTX 2060 Super at below 700, which I know aren't really great pricing, but it's better than spending more than $600 on a silly 6600 Super, or even $1,000 for a 3060 Ti. The pricing isn't that great, and if you need something decent, the secondhand market isn't that nice for pricing, but at least you won't have to spend as much more money. Next, we have the case. This is the Fantex Eclipse P360A mid-tower case for around 144 New Zealand dollars. This case apparently comes with 2 front intake fans, but no exhaust fans, so I will add that into the cost, which will be about $50 extra for a good RGB Corsair LR120 or even a nice Noctua one if you're into that. Now I'm not really sure if these are high static pressure or high airflow fans inbuilt into the case, but if you want to learn more about the differences in case fans, I would highly recommend that you do take a look, and it does actually make a difference in terms of temperature and hence performance. There are videos from Linus and Jay's 2 cents about these types of fans. One of them is static pressure versus high airflow, and the other one is I compared static pressure fans versus airflow on a radio. Here's what happened. So those are really good videos to go and check it out. I'd highly recommend you do that. From what I've seen in store and online reviews such as the ones from Gamers Nexus, the Fantex Eclipse P360A mid-tower is a decent case with good airflow. One of the major reasons is because it's able to intake air from the front mesh of the case, hence increasing airflow. Compared to a solid panel, the open panel case will be able to take more air, which would lead to better performance. I even cut a DIY hole in the front of my front panel and made a custom mesh panel for my own PC, which a video will be coming out for soon. If you're looking for a decent case, I'd highly recommend searching up reviews on them. Gamers Nexus has some really good, awesome in-depth case reviews, and I'd highly recommend go checking them out. And also try get one that has a mesh front panel. It does help a lot, especially when you get higher tier components. Lastly, the power supply. Now, I'm not really sure about the specs you're putting in this PC, as it kind of varies from the things I've suggested, so I'm thinking it's better to go with something higher end and reliable, such as the RMX 750, which is a 750 watt Corsair power supply and is gold rated with components made in Japan. I can personally vouch for this power supply and I haven't had any issues with it so far. I literally use it every day. It's around $200 New Zealand plus, but it is worth it considering that it is extremely high quality and you won't really have to replace it for a long time. Also, make sure you get an RMX power supply, as the RM series has parts from China, which are generally lower quality. It's also good to note that the RMX series also has a really good manufacturer's warranty, and from memory I believe it's around 5 to 10 years, which is really good, so they really do back their product. And in New Zealand we got the Consumer Guarantees Act, so we're pretty sussed under that. An alternative power supply is also the Silverstone Strider, which I have used in some of my friends' PC builds. It's 650 watt, gold rated, and around $40 cheaper at the moment at around $159 New Zealand. It's usually actually about $140, it's gone up in price. Basically, if you're getting something like a 2060 Super or below combined with an Intel CPU, you could be fine with something using a 550 watt power supply, or even the 650 one if you want to go for that, if you aren't overclocking as well. If you want to use something like the RTX 3060 or the 6600 XT or above, I would probably go for something at least 650 watt gold rated. Now, the one I did recommend is 750 watts, so you could get the 650 watt as well, but personally I really do like that 750 watt because I can upgrade my computer whenever I want, basically with no issues on power supply. So yeah, so to sum up this build, we've come to $2,084.90 New Zealand dollars. So I think that's a pretty good price for a brand new computer in this current market. I wouldn't say it's the best pricing at all, considering it's $2,000. That's quite a bit. At the same time, we've put higher tier components and things that will benefit your computer in the long run, I feel. Just better quality stuff. And at the same time, it's a decent computer with an i5 10400, or you can go for some other options, and an RX 6600 XT. Personally, this is a computer I'd probably get myself if I were building brand new, but I would never build brand new in this type of market. But if you are wanting to do that, then this would be the way to go. This is part 1 of the video, so there will be several other parts coming out after this. The other video will be comparing this build to some pre-builds and some other options you have there. Of course, there'll be a video on secondhand market and what we can do for computers at a lower price point. So overall, this computer will range you anywhere from $1,900 to about $2,100, I believe. And I say 1,900 because if we take out the hard drive, the extra CPU cooler if you want to use the stock one, and the extra case fan, you should be fine. You can get a cheaper case fan, there's no problem with that. I just put the LR120 because it's like a standard RGB one, pretty used by a lot of people. It's kind of expensive at $50. It says 38 here, but it's really 50. First Wave has some special sometimes, but yeah, I think you can get it down to 1,900 pretty well, and none of these prices are on specials as far as I know, so these are full priced. And yeah, I mean, we're on level 4 lockdown in Auckland, so prices are a bit expensive at the moment. So that's it for part 1. Thank you guys very much for watching for the cheaper, quote unquote cheaper build for September. And yeah, make sure you go check out part 2 where we compare it to some pre-builts. We'll have some other parts as well. Part 3 will most likely be second hand, and part 4 will be another build that's a little bit more expensive. And if I get some time, maybe a part 5 on comparing these builds to prices from last year. But thank you guys, this about sums up the video. Make sure you go check out ystech.org for latest post reviews and much more. See you guys there at ystech.org. But other than that, I hope you guys have an awesome day. Stay safe, stay healthy, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye.